she did great.
Hi, I'm Janelise, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. It has been like 8 months since I've last posted, and I wasn't sure where to start up again, but I think where I would love to start up is I reached my goal this year of losing the pregnancy weight. Woo! This was the first time in my life that I had like a good portion of weight that I wanted to try to lose, and I really put my efforts in naturally to make it happen, and I was really happy with the results. So I'm about to mention some numbers, so if it's triggering for you at all to hear about weight and hear about any of this, feel free to skip over this video or skip over this portion, and I'll put a timestamp here where I'm done speaking about numbers. Prior to my pregnancy, I was around 193 to 195 pounds. I was at a higher BMI than what doctors would have recommended at the time, but I kind of chalked it up to the fact that I'm short and I'm curvy, and this is just kind of where I've settled throughout the years. I was on the Mirena IUD for about 10 years, and even when I was extremely active on the Mirena IUD, I found that I gained weight really easily. And so especially when I wasn't active for a time period on the Mirena IUD, the weight just piled on really quickly, and I gained about 70 pounds. Especially in my teenage years and my early 20s, I really struggled with my self-image, and I chose to use this time period of weight gain as a time to really self-reflect and learn body acceptance, and just appreciate that my body is strong. God created this body, and if it's a little bit bigger than what I remember, then that's okay. As long as I'm taking care of myself and I can love myself, then that is what's most important. What's great is that because I used that time period to really learn to accept my changing body, when I got pregnant and once again it became a changing body, I wasn't so afraid of it, right? Because I just spent the last decade or so being like, hey, I gain weight, it happens, that doesn't make me any less worthy of anything. Right before I delivered, I was around 220 pounds, and then after I delivered, kind of settled into my new weight, I settled in at 216 pounds. So I went from 216 pounds postpartum down to now 190 pounds postpartum, and I'm happy to share what I did to make that happen. Now, my choice at the time wasn't to lose it for aesthetic reasons. It was more for health reasons. I had already experienced what it was like to be pregnant and to be gaining weight and growing a baby at a higher weight. And I knew I wanted to have a second baby not too long after. And so I wanted to make sure that at the very least I could get down to my pre-pregnancy weight. That way, if I got pregnant again and gained all the weight back, I was starting at 195 and not 200 and this. I had some breastfeeding difficulties in terms of milk production and breastfeeding my daughter. And so I didn't want to focus on weight loss at the beginning of my postpartum journey, because I wanted to ensure that I was like a really good milk producing cow during that time. And I didn't want any kind of weight loss to impact my milk production. Around 6 months postpartum, I returned back to work. And while I was trying to pump around the clock, unfortunately, my milk production still started to dip. I think probably the time period, pumping schedules, and just being away from my daughter probably all impacted my milk supply at the time. After around 8 months, I decided to kind of put myself out of that misery and choose to fully switch over to formula, which I had been supplementing since my milk supply was dipping anyways. I was really glad to make that decision, because now with breastfeeding and milk production and all the things it takes to be a cow kind of put aside and out of my mind, I was able to start transitioning over to the idea of losing my pregnancy weight. So at first I reached out to my PCP, and I was actually really interested in getting on semaglutide GLP-1 like a Wegovy, and seeing if maybe that would help. At the time, it was actually in back order for about 2 months. So even though because of my BMI, I was eligible, they were like, we just don't have it right now. Well, we do have our phentermine tablets, which should at least kind of help you kickstart the journey until this becomes available. I hadn't used it before, so I tried, and unfortunately, it just wasn't for me. They gave me the warning that phentermine tablets are kind of high in caffeine and could cause a lot of irritability. And I knew that that's what they had said, but I had no idea. Like, that just felt like an understatement. I was irritable and angry out of my mind. I was only on the phentermine tablets for about 2 days, and at the time my daughter was then 9 months old, and it just felt like when she cried, like my skin was crawling. Like I was furious for hearing her, furious at my husband, like just furious at everybody. Thankfully, me and my husband are really close, and so after a couple of days he was just kind of like, hey, you are never this cranky. What is going on here? You know, could it be the tablets? Because I know your doctor warned you, but this is scary. The second he brought that up to me, I realized for sure that was probably the side effects that I was feeling. And I did not like how that made me feel. I knew that I wanted to lose the pregnancy weight, but I also didn't want it to be at the cost of being like a bitch to my daughter and to my husband. So I let my doctor know, hey, I'm gonna get off these tablets and I'm just gonna keep finding another method. My best friend's fiance is actually a personal trainer, so I was asking them some tips. I also was just all over Google and just trying to figure out like what did other mothers in postpartum do as well. The two biggest tips that I saw that I knew were gonna be easy enough for me to implement was, one, try to increase my steps by walking at least 8,000 steps a day. At the time, especially in postpartum, you are like whoop, parked on the couch, pulling out your boob every 5 seconds to feed your baby. So that first 6 months where I was on maternity leave, I mean, I'm surprised the couch doesn't have like a permanent ass print for how much I was just sitting on the couch. When I returned back to work at 6 months postpartum, I also have a remote job where I'm working on my laptop. So again, just utilizing that permanent ass print on the couch. So I knew, okay, getting 8,000 steps might also help with my weight loss, but it's probably something I need to do anyways, because the last 8 to 9 months, all I've been doing is sitting. I need to move. The second piece of advice I had gotten was try to increase my protein and my fiber intake. Based on various sources, the goal that I set for myself at the time was try to get 100 plus grams of protein a day and 15 to 25 grams of fiber a day. So with the walking and with the changes in the diet, those were easy enough to implement that I didn't feel like I was making this crazy lifestyle change. When it came to the walks, I have a dog who, you know, enjoys going for walks outside. So instead of going for just one, we started going for 2 or 3. We went for a morning, a lunch, and a night walk. And easily each of those walks would get me like 2 to 2,500 steps. So at the end of the day, with those 3 walks implemented, that usually got me somewhere between 7,000 and 7,500 steps. I also invested in a walking pad. So on the days where it was like more rainy or cold outside, I would just do my steps in the walking pad instead. As for diet, the first thing I did was just started implementing a protein shake in the morning, because at the very least that meant I was starting my day with 30 grams of protein. I also, for lunch and dinner, would really focus on just making sure that I was increasing my protein intake, and also just throughout the day in terms of snacks, looking for snacks that were high in protein and high in fiber, or either or, high in protein or high in fiber. The fiber was one that I found a little bit more tricky. Like in terms of protein, I found that to be pretty easy. Okay, eat more chicken, like eat more eggs, have some egg whites, cottage cheese, edamame, chocolate milk, whatever it is. Like there's a lot of things that have high protein that are just easy enough to implement into my diet. But the fiber was the one that I found the most challenging, because it's like in nothing except for fruits and vegetables, which obviously you're supposed to eat. So I just started making sure I was increasing my fruit and vegetable intake, especially fruits and vegetables that were higher in fiber, as well as introducing like chia seeds into my diet, which are also high in fiber. So with that implemented, in the first couple of months alone, I started losing like 1 to 2 pounds a week, which was amazing. It was the first time that I actually started seeing the scale go down ever in my life. And I was just like, wow, like I'm doing this. By then, the doctor let me know that the GLP-1 semaglutide was available, but I reached out and I said, you know what, never mind. Someone else could probably use that. I feel like I found something that's working for me. I know that it's kind of slow. There are times where the weight loss is kind of like really ramping up, and then there's times where it kind of plateaus. But overall, I just feel like what I'm doing right now is working. I'm feeling good, I'm feeling energetic, and I'm just going to continue with that. I met with the nutritionist and they said, it sounds great what you're doing so far. Seems like the diet changes are working. Seems like the steps are working. Something else that you might want to implement is doing some strength training as well, because we want to make sure that when you're losing the weight, more of it is fat than it is muscle, which makes sense to me. That was the first time in like 7 years that I stepped in a gym. I used to go to the gym back in college, but afterward, between like working my job, going to grad school, getting married, having a kid, like I just thought that gyms were just completely out of my realm of possibility. Thankfully, my mom works as an instructor at the YMCA, so she was able to get me a discount at the YMCA, and there's one to 5 minutes from the house. So I started trying to make it a point to go 1 to 2 times a week and really focusing on strength training during that time. That became also a big help in the weight loss because I definitely started feeling stronger in terms of muscle tone. The great thing about my body is, yes, it gains fat easily, but it also gains muscle really easily. So being back in the gym, having my protein intake high, getting my weightlifting in was just like helping me to tone up really, really quickly. I also started implementing spinning for the first time ever, which is like those bikes. And I have like only ever tried it once in college, hated it because it made my ass sore beyond belief to be on those seats. But I really wanted to have like a new cardio option that wasn't just walking. And I felt so empowered on those things. Like I felt like I was like on a war horse, like riding into battle. Spinning was also so challenging for me, but I obviously, as somebody that like went through the process of birthing a child, I just had this mentality during my spinning classes that like there was nothing I couldn't do. I was like the most powerful woman in the world, and I could get through this next 5 minutes, this next 10 minutes, this next 30 minutes. And at the end of the classes, I just felt so sweaty and so proud and so satisfied. And that was such a fun way to implement cardio a couple of days a week that was like more high intensity than just walking. So by the end of the summer, by around September really of this year, I was officially not just down to my pre-pregnancy weight, but 5 pounds less than my pre-pregnancy weight. I was so proud of myself. I was happy to like be back in the gym and just be back in my element. I was happy to be spinning and just trying out a new exercise that I thought I hated and it turned out I loved. It gave me an opportunity as a mom to just have like a few days of self-care during the week. It also just gave me an opportunity to be out more, getting vitamin D and getting fresh air when I was going for walks with my dog. And overall, these changes were not just great for my body, but for my mental health. I just felt so much stronger in postpartum by implementing these changes. So while, this is, I guess, personal news for me, I was very excited to share it. Sometimes it feels like when you set a goal for yourself, even if it's something like weight loss or diet changes or lifestyle changes, it can feel so daunting in the beginning. And for me, it definitely felt very daunting in the beginning, but to see that my progress was working and just being consistent, it was working, I felt so proud of myself. And even when it was just a 1 pound weight loss and I started seeing the scale tip, even just the tiniest bit, like I just felt so proud of myself to say like, I set this goal, I put in the work, and it paid off. And I was just very, very proud of myself. Now I'm using all of this in the past tense. Not because I have gained the weight back yet, but because the news I want to share in my next video will explain how I'm going to probably gain all this weight back. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.